Some troubling news out of New York State. Let's throw this up there on the screen with an increase in coronavirus cases. Now, it's not like a lot, but it is a general uptick in the rolling 7-day average, not just in New York City, but in some of the surrounding counties in New Jersey. Now, this matters because people have been kind of laser focused on what is going to happen as the weather begins to change. We've had fall-like weather here in the Northeast now for about 2 or 3 weeks. That weather, and as the temperatures begin to drop, as people begin to move more inside, as all social activity has to move indoors or end, and I don't think that that's a realistic possibility this far in the pandemic, we could see an increase in cases.
Yeah.
And that could just change the political dynamics within, just a month. Remember, the last time around, which is that spike in the South that we saw in coronavirus, 3 weeks before, it seemed negligible. And it started exactly with this because things move exponentially whenever it comes to this virus.
There's some 20 states, somewhere around 20 states that are experiencing an increase in positive coronavirus cases right now. There seems to be a little bit of an uptick in hospital rates. And it reminds me, the New York data in particular, reminds me of that exchange we played here with Fauci and Rand Paul.
Yes. Yeah.
Where Rand was like, look in New York, they're doing great. It's because they have herd immunity or herd mentality, as the president likes to call it. And Fauci was like, no, you're an idiot, essentially. Senator Rand, he called him. Let me correct the record here, because you don't have nearly enough of the population that's been infected to have herd immunity. That is not a thing. And of course, now we see that New York is not immune. They could very much potentially see a surge. The entire country is certainly at risk as temperatures turn cooler. Remember from the beginning, Trump was talking about how the cold weather is easier for the virus to propagate. We're heading into cold weather. We're heading into a situation where people can no longer eat outdoors. They're inside more. So, look, nothing is written in stone here, but these are troubling indications. And at the same time, lucky for us, we've got an amazing, I'm being sarcastic here, advisor to the president who has apparently really risen in esteem. Scott Atlas. This is someone you called attention to, Saagar.
Yes.
This guy is a big believer. He's unqualified, but worse even than being unqualified is he has terrible ideas about how to manage this pandemic. He's a big believer in this stupid herd immunity approach, which was tried in Sweden and did not work out well for them. They still had catastrophic economic results, and they had more deaths than any of their surrounding neighbors.
I don't even want to litigate his credentials. Look, he's a Hoover guy. He's from Stanford University. He's a healthcare policy expert, radiologist, whatever. I called from the beginning that this would be a political disaster, because that's another thing that we should focus on here, which is that all policy is ultimately political, as in just because something might be the right policy or you might think it's the right policy, if you don't have the public backing on it or you don't have enough public trust, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And that is exactly the case with Dr. Atlas, who has been pushing herd immunity in the White House. We called it from the beginning. The moment I saw that Washington Post headline where they were like, Scott Atlas is now advising, I was like, that's it. I know what's going to happen here. They're going to push the herd immunity. They're going to push the fact, they're like, oh, it's all about herd immunity. All we need to do is really reopen the economy and embrace and elevate these people, and that is what's happening. So they've put Dr. Atlas at front and center of a coronavirus task force briefing where Dr. Fauci actually wasn't. Guess who the American people trust? Again, you can hate Dr. Fauci if you want, but majority of Americans don't agree with you. Same thing with Dr. Atlas. Majority of Americans do not believe in the herd immunity strategy. 75% say they would rather have social distancing than even if that means suffering some economic consequences.
Yeah.
Just remember that. It's over 80% among senior voters. And lo and behold, what's happening inside the government? Let's throw this up there on the screen. Well, classic. CDC Director Robert Redfield voices alarm over the influence of Trump's new coronavirus task advisor. I think he said something along the lines of, quote, he doesn't know what he's talking about, and has accused him of trying to meddle in the process and force more of a reopening herd immunity strategy. Once again, this is the worst possible thing you could do to regain trust on coronavirus with the American people. Let's say you actually do believe in herd immunity and in reopening the economy. I think it's a legitimate position. I disagree with it, but I think it's legitimate. Then you need to regain the trust of the American people. You need to have a large amount of trust with Americans to say, look, we went wrong. This is what we now believe is the strategy. These are the payoffs. Make your case. But they're not even doing that. They have zero trust with America. The White House bungled this from the very beginning, and pushing a guy like Dr. Atlas, I think if Trump loses, it will be because of fools like this.
Well, and the fact is they tried to make this case to the American people of basically like, look, let's just reopen. Let's just do it. I mean, they tried. They tried to push school reopenings, which is another thing we're going to talk about here in a minute. They tried to push the let's just reopen the economy thing. And that message and that approach was overwhelmingly rejected by Americans. I mean, there is a small contingent that, yes, is open to that. We showed yesterday the polling data that the only age group that's behind Trump at this point is 45 to 64, which kind of makes sense because you're in your prime earning years. Like, this is when you're supposed to be laying down some dollars into your bank account so you can save for retirement. That's the one group that this has kind of landed with, but you've lost seniors. You've lost basically everybody else because they reject your approach fundamentally. And, you know, it really, the thing that sucks so much about all of this is the way that Trump has politicized every single aspect of the coronavirus pandemic. So mask wearing, obviously being an obvious example, vaccines now, but the other area that he really politicized is school reopenings. There's new information from the New York Times about the way that he pressured the CDC to downplay any negative data about the risks of sending children back to the classroom. And the reality is, Saagar, now that we do have some schools that have reopened in Florida in particular, there is some data that young children in particular are doing okay in school. It hasn't led to a massive spike in cases. That's data that should be evaluated just like from a scientific perspective, because you do have a lot of poor kids who, by being out of school, like virtual learning is not working for them. They may not have internet access. They may not have, you know, they've got parents who are working or struggling in different ways who can't support them in the way they need in the home. These kids and their future should really be considered here. And because this whole debate has become so overwhelmingly politicized, we're not able to have that conversation nationally. It's just become this like stupid, once again, partisan football here.
Yeah, look, and that's why I said here, I think that the White House bungled this from the beginning, and I also was like, yeah, I think schools should reopen because of the data like this. And it's actually a tragedy. And I think both sides have politicized it, which is that the moment that Trump came out against it, then the California and all of them were like, nope, we're done. You know, no consideration of the data. In both particular cases, who suffers? It's the kids. They're the ones who are suffering, especially the poorer children who are out there without access to internet. There are stories of people who have had to drop out of college, community college, because they couldn't make it. Those are the people I think about.
Lower income kids, disproportionately minority who are impacted. And the key part in this research about Florida schools is like they really attribute to the fact that it hasn't been a super spreader event to the mask wearing, the basic things that we've known from essentially the beginning once they stopped lying to us about masks, that if we had just had universal mask wearing from the beginning, I think we would have had so many fewer deaths and we actually would have had to shut down so much less of the economy if we just had done that one thing. And of course, that ship has sailed now.
There we go. All right.
All right, we're going to have more Rising for you after this.